Welcome to Hidden Horrors, where the stories aren't just told, they're felt. And sometimes what you're watching isn't watching you back, it's watching you first. For years, Studio 6 was just another hallway in daytime television. Bright lights, fake laughter, a place where smiles were currency. But that Tuesday morning, something changed. I walked into post-production like I always did, coffee in hand, headphones around my neck, ready to sync applause tracks and clean up celebrity sound bites. But the silence was different, thicker, like the walls were holding their breath. I logged into the system, routine, until I saw it. A file, unlabeled, no timestamp, just a name, ellenfinal.go. I hesitated. It wasn't in the archive. It wasn't in the logs. It shouldn't have existed. I clicked. The screen went black, static. Then slowly she appeared. Ellen, sitting, still. No makeup, no lights, just her face. She wasn't smiling. Her eyes locked onto the lens, onto me. And then she whispered, "You think I'm just a smile, but smiles are the oldest disguise." I froze. This wasn't a blooper. This wasn't behind the scenes. This was something else. Something meant to be buried. Something that found its way to me. You ever notice how some smiles feel too perfect? Like they're holding something back, or hiding something deeper. The next morning, everything looked normal. Studio lights, makeup artists, producers pacing with clipboards. But something had shifted. Ellen saw me. Not glanced, not passed by. She stopped, turned, and smiled. That smile, it was the same one from the video. Too wide, too still, too aware. I walked past her, pretending not to notice, but I felt it. Like her eyes were pressing into my spine. Back in the audio bay, I checked the system. The file was gone. ellenfinal.mov had vanished. No trace, no logs, no recycle bin. But I knew what I saw, and I knew it wasn't just a file. That day during rehearsal, something changed. The lights were brighter, but the air was colder. I put on my headphones, and I heard it. A frequency, thin, barely audible, but layered. Underneath the static, a whisper. "You think I'm gone. I'm just beneath the surface." I pulled the headphones off, but the sound didn't stop. It was in the walls, in the floor, in me. The silence behind the door was louder than the breath echoing in his ears. It pressed against him like static, thick and unnatural. His flashlight trembled, not from fear this time, but from something worse, curiosity. A need to understand, a need to hear that sound again. That muffled, distorted echo that mocked the human voice but never quite became one. He turned toward the stairwell. The air grew heavier with each step, as if the house itself resented his movement. The wooden boards beneath his feet groaned, not in protest but in warning. A language of creaks and sighs, ancient and intimate. At the bottom of the stairs, the basement door stood ajar. It had been shut the night before, locked. He remembered checking it twice. The darkness beyond the doorway wasn't empty, it was waiting. He stepped inside. The air was damp, metallic. The kind of smell that clung to skin and memory. The flashlight beam swept across the walls, revealing something new, markings. Fresh ones, carved deep into the plaster, erratic and deliberate, as if someone had tried to speak without a tongue. Symbols, scratches, fingerprints, nail trails, and then a word, scrawled in jagged strokes, almost illegible but unmistakable. "Don't." He stared at it, heart pounding, when a whisper brushed the back of his neck. Not loud, not clear, but close. "You already did." He spun around. Nothing. Just the staircase behind him, stretching upward like a throat. But the whisper lingered, not in the air but in his mind. It didn't sound angry. It sounded disappointed. And then he noticed something else. The markings on the wall weren't random. They formed a pattern, a spiral. And at its center, a small childlike drawing, a door. The same door he had just walked through. He reached out to touch it, and the wall pulsed beneath his fingers. The moment Ellen touched the spiral, the wall pulsed beneath her fingers, briefly alive. The cold surface warmed, throbbed like a heartbeat. She tried to pull away, but it was too late. The basement shifted. The darkness reassembled itself. The walls moved. The ceiling lowered. The air thickened. She was no longer in a basement. She was in a child's room. But it was wrong. The walls were painted in faded pastels, blue, yellow, pink, but the colors bled into each other like bruises. Beneath the paint, cracked plaster peeked through like old scars. Toys were scattered across the floor, some familiar, some impossibly foreign. A small bed stood in the corner, its sheets wrinkled and stained. On it a stuffed bear, one eye missing, the other staring. But this stare wasn't empty, it was accusatory. Ellen stepped forward. The carpet was soft beneath her feet, but something moved underneath, breathing, waiting. Each step triggered a flicker of memory, a flash of light, a child's laugh, then silence. One wall rippled. No, something moved behind it, a shadow. Small, human-shaped, but not human, not anymore. It whispered, "You left me here." Her breath caught, her eyes welled up. She didn't remember, but her body did. This room, these toys, this voice, they were once part of her. But why had she buried them? The shadow stepped closer. It had no face, but it had a voice. "Now it's your turn." She backed away, but the room shrank. The walls crept inward. The ceiling pressed down. The air grew colder. The shadow sat beside the stuffed bear. The bear's remaining eye fell to the floor with a soft thud. Something rolled out from inside it. A key. Rusty, small, familiar. The shadow picked it up and held it out to her. "If you open the door, everything comes back." Ellen reached for it, but stopped, because on the far wall something new had appeared. A drawing, childlike, crude, a door, and beneath it, a date. November 14th, 1997. The numbers echoed in her mind. That date, that day. What happened? Why couldn't she remember? And why was the house showing her now? The key trembled in the shadow's hand. "You forgot me, but I didn't forget you." Ellen reached for the key. The moment her fingers brushed against the shadow's hand, something shifted. The room trembled, not violently, but subtly, like a breath held too long. The walls shimmered, briefly translucent. Through them she saw glimpses of other rooms, rooms that didn't exist. Rooms that felt like memories she never lived. She took the key. The shadow withdrew. The stuffed bear vanished. The room fell silent. But it wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that warns you something is listening. Then in the far corner a door appeared. It hadn't been there before. It was real, solid wood, iron frame, but it felt wrong, like it had been waiting. There was no handle, just a keyhole, and the key in her hand fit perfectly. Ellen stepped toward it. Each footfall echoed louder than it should have. The air thickened. Her ears rang with fragments of sound. Screams, whispers, a child's voice. "Don't open it." But she did. The key turned with a reluctant click. The door creaked open. Darkness spilled out, not empty, but alive. It wasn't absence. It was memory. It pulled her in. She didn't fall. She was taken. The space beyond the door wasn't a room. It was a corridor, narrow, breathing. The walls weren't flat. They pulsed, undulated like lungs. The floor beneath her feet felt soft, almost organic. Every step she took made the corridor react, tightening, whispering. "You chose this. You forgot. You returned." At the end of the corridor stood a table. On it a cassette player, old, dusty. Next to it a single tape, a handwritten label. "You can't go back until you listen." Ellen stared at it. Her hand trembled. The corridor behind her had vanished. There was no way out, only forward. She pressed play. The tape hissed. Then a voice, familiar, young, hers. "If you're hearing this, it means you finally remembered." "Absolutely, Ginner." Here's the fully expanded English version of Part 6, the voice on the tape, designed to heighten dread, deepen Ellen's psychological fragmentation, and build toward a climactic reveal. I've layered in more sensory detail, emotional nuance, and symbolic tension, while preserving the pacing and tone we've established. Part 6, the voice on the tape. Fully expanded. Ellen pressed play. The cassette hissed, then silence, then breathing, slow, wet, as if someone were exhaling directly into her ear. It wasn't just sound, it was presence. Then a voice, childlike. but wrong, distorted. Not aged by time, but warped by something else. It didn't sound like a recording. It sounded like something pretending to be one. If you're hearing this, it means you've started to remember. Ellen froze. The voice continued, calm and deliberate. You buried me, but I never left. I stayed. In that room, at that hour, on that day. You ran, but I remained. The tape crackled. A metallic ringing bled through the audio like old wires straining under pressure. Then another voice emerged, older, steadier, familiar. Her own. I didn't want to, but I did. The air around her shifted. The corridor's walls began to breathe faster, more erratically. The floor trembled beneath her. Ellen tried to step back, but her feet were locked in place, not by force, by memory. The voices began to overlap. The child's voice, her own, a third voice, low, indecipherable, all repeating the same phrase. You opened the door. You opened the door. The tape clicked, stopped, but the voices didn't. They spilled from the walls, from the floor, from inside her. Ellen turned. At the far end of the corridor, a silhouette had appeared. Not a shadow, not a person, but something familiar. Its shape was wrong, too still, too symmetrical, but its presence was undeniable. It held something in its hand, another cassette. This one had a different label, handwritten, shaky, smudged. This time, listen to the end. The figure stepped forward, slowly, deliberately. The corridor didn't resist. It welcomed the movement, pulsing in rhythm with its steps. Ellen's breath caught. Her chest tightened. The air felt thick like she was inhaling water. The figure stopped a few feet away. It didn't speak. It didn't blink. It simply extended the tape. She didn't take it. Not yet, because behind the figure, the corridor had changed. The walls were no longer breathing. They were watching. Eyes had formed, dozens of them. Childlike, painted, real, and every eye was focused on her. Then the figure spoke, but not aloud, inside her head. You forgot me, but I didn't forget you. Ellen took the tape. Her fingers trembled as she inserted it into the player. The corridor was silent now, but not still. The walls pulsed faintly, like veins beneath skin. The eyes embedded in the surface didn't blink. They waited. She pressed play. The tape began with static. Then a voice, not distorted, not distant, clear, present, her own, but younger, more vulnerable, more afraid. I didn't mean to leave you. I didn't know what would happen. Then another voice, the child's, but this time it wasn't pretending. It was real, raw. You promised. The tape hissed, then a sound, wet, dragging. Something being pulled across a floor. Ellen's breath caught. You said you'd come back. The corridor darkened, not visually, but emotionally. The air grew heavier, the walls leaned inward. The eyes began to weep, not tears, ink. The tape continued. They told me you forgot, but I didn't. I waited in the room. I counted the days. I counted the cracks in the ceiling. Ellen's knees buckled. She dropped to the floor. The player kept going. You locked the door. You turned the key. You walked away. Then silence. Then her own voice again. I was scared. I thought it was the only way. The corridor responded. A low hum, like something waking up. The tape clicked but didn't stop. It reversed automatically and played again. But this time, the voice was different. Not Ellen, not the child. Something else. Now you remember. Now you belong. The corridor split open. Behind the tape player, a new door appeared. Smaller, older, burned around the edges. No handle, no keyhole, just a word carved into the wood. Stay. Ellen stared at it. The ink dripping from the walls began to pool around her feet. It wasn't just liquid, it was memory. It shimmered with images, a broken toy, a locked closet, a scream muffled by a pillow. She looked back at the cassette player. It was melting, warping. The tape inside spun faster and faster until the voice returned, this time whispering directly into her ear. If you leave again, it won't be me who follows. The stay door creaked, not open, not closed, breathing. Ellen stepped forward, and the corridor whispered, choose. The door pulsed, not with sound but with memory. The word carved into its surface, "Stay," seemed to breathe. Ellen stood before it, ink pooling around her feet, the corridor behind her collapsing into shadow. She reached out. The wood was warm, not like something alive, like something remembering. Behind her, the cassette player had melted into the floor. The eyes on the walls had closed, but the silence wasn't relief. It was anticipation. She pressed her palm against the door. It didn't open. It inhaled. A rush of air pulled her forward, not physically but emotionally. She saw flashes, a child's hand reaching for hers, a locked closet, a scream swallowed by wallpaper. The house wasn't showing her memories, it was feeding her its own. Then the voice returned, "If you stay, you become part of it." Ellen stepped back. The corridor responded. The walls rippled, the ink rose. A shape began to form in the liquid, small, hunched, familiar. The child, but not the child, a version of her, younger, hollow-eyed, mouth stitched shut. It pointed at the door. "You promised." Ellen's breath faltered. Her hand trembled. She looked at the door again. The word had changed. "Remember." She blinked. It changed again. "Regret." Then again. "Return." The door wasn't asking her to stay. It was asking her to choose how. She stepped forward. The ink child stepped back. The door opened. Inside was not a room, not a memory, not a place. It was a mirror, but it didn't reflect her. It reflected the version of her that stayed, the version that never left, the version that locked the door and forgot, and it smiled. Ellen stared at it. The mirror shimmered. The reflection moved, but she hadn't. It tilted its head, raised its hand, pressed it against the glass. Ellen felt it. Not cold, not warm, familiar. Then the reflection spoke. "You can stay here, with me. We'll never forget again." Behind her, the corridor began to collapse. The ink child dissolved into the floor. The walls cracked. The ceiling groaned. The mirror pulsed. The reflection leaned closer. "Or you can leave and forget me again." Ellen's heart pounded. Her breath came in short, sharp bursts. She looked into the eyes of the version that stayed and saw something she hadn't expected. Peace, not comfort, not safety, but peace. The kind that comes after surrender. She reached out. The mirror rippled. The reflection smiled wider and whispered, "Welcome home." Ellen stepped forward. The mirror rippled, not like glass, but like water under pressure. Her reflection didn't mimic her movements. It watched. It waited. Then it smiled. Not cruelly, not kindly, just knowingly. Ellen raised her hand. The reflection did not. It leaned closer, pressing its palm to the inside of the mirror. She felt it, warm, pulsing, familiar, like touching her own heartbeat. The corridor behind her groaned. The ink had dried. The eyes had vanished. The house was no longer breathing. It was listening. The reflection spoke. "You've carried me long enough. Let me carry you." Ellen hesitated. She looked into the mirror and saw not just herself, but every version of her that had ever been afraid. Every moment she had buried, every door she had locked. The mirror shimmered. The reflection changed. Now it was the child, mouth stitched shut, eyes wide, hands trembling. Then it was the shadow. Then it was the ink. Then it was her again, but older, tired, still smiling. "You don't have to remember alone." Ellen stepped closer. The mirror pulsed. The reflection opened its arms, and Ellen stepped through. There was no impact. No resistance, just silence. Inside the mirror, everything was still. No corridor, no ink, no house, just her, and the version that stayed. They stood together, not merged, not separate, just aware. Then the voice returned, not from the mirror, from inside her. "Now you know." The mirror sealed behind her. Outside, the corridor collapsed, the house exhaled, and Ellen, whatever version remained, opened her eyes. But the world was different. The air was still. The light was soft. The silence was complete. She was standing in a room, not the house, not the corridor, a bedroom, familiar. The walls were pale blue. The curtains swayed gently, though there was no wind. A single lamp glowed on the nightstand, and on the bed, an old stuffed bear, one eye missing. Ellen stepped forward. Her footsteps made no sound. She reached for the bear. It was warm. She sat on the edge of the bed, and then she saw it. On the wall across from her, another mirror. But this one didn't ripple. It reflected her. Just her. No child, no shadow, no distortion, just Ellen, and she was smiling, not knowingly, not eerily, just peacefully. Then the voice returned, soft, final. You stayed. Ellen sat on the edge of the bed. The stuffed bear lay beside her, one eye missing, the other staring forward. The room was quiet, not empty, just still. The kind of stillness that follows a storm, or precedes one. She looked around. The walls were pale blue. The curtains swayed gently, though there was no wind. A lamp glowed softly on the nightstand. Everything felt familiar, but not remembered, like a dream she'd lived too many times to know if it was hers. She stood. Her footsteps made no sound. She walked to the mirror across the room. It reflected her, just her. No child, no shadow, no distortion, just Ellen. She stared at herself and smiled, but the smile didn't feel like hers. It felt inherited. Then the lamp flickered, once, twice, then stayed lit. From behind the mirror a sound, a soft knock. 3 taps, then silence. Ellen didn't move. She didn't speak. She simply watched. The mirror shimmered, not visibly, emotionally. She felt it, a presence, not threatening, not comforting, just waiting. Then the voice returned, soft, familiar, inside her. You stayed. Now they will come. She turned toward the door. It was closed, but not locked. She stepped forward. Her hand hovered over the knob. She didn't open it. She didn't need to, because on the other side she heard breathing. Not one, many, slow, rhythmic, like the house had grown lungs. She stepped back, sat down, picked up the bear, and whispered, I remember now. The room didn't respond. It didn't need to. It had become her, and she had become the room. Then the breathing stopped. The silence returned. But it was different now. Not empty, full of her, full of them. She looked at the walls. They were no longer blue. They were covered in drawings, childlike, crude, scenes from her past, scenes she had never seen, scenes she had never wanted to. A closet door, a broken toy, a girl crying, a girl watching, a girl smiling. She stood again, walked to the wall, touched one of the drawings. It pulsed. She felt it. Not paper, not paint, memory, alive. Then the door creaked, just slightly, enough to let in a sliver of darkness, not threatening, not comforting, just familiar. Ellen turned toward it and smiled again. This time, it was hers.